Hello. Passionate about sustainability, energy and climate? You're in the right place. Welcome to Energetic. I'm Maureen Cornelis, and together we will engage with people who dedicate their lives to climate justice and making a just energy transition happen. They may be activists, scientists, policymakers, or other enthusiasts, just like you. Let the life stories and insights inspire you to build a better future for people and the planet. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Olivia Sicurani, who is the head of innovation at Sympower, a company leading the charge in unlocking the power of flexibility to transition to a renewable energy system. With over a decade of experience in the energy sector, Olivia has helped international tech startups and scale-ups navigate the challenges of growth and sustainability. She brings a unique blend of technical expertise and strategic thinking to the table, making complex energy challenges accessible and actionable. She's a trained engineer and also a seasoned leader, and Olivia is absolutely passionate about creating solutions that empower industries, communities, and teams to embrace a sustainable energy future. Olivia, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited because it's actually the first time I have an aggregator around the table. So you will be explaining us all about aggregators. But first, let's start with you and your journey. So you are a trained engineer. You didn't start with the energy sector, right? What first sparked your interest in this field?
Yeah, so I would say that it all started when I watched an Inconvenient Truths back in 2006. So that's actually a long time ago. From that moment onward, I really knew I wanted to do something related to climate change. I think with my background, you need to pick your battle, right? And I think the energy transition is something that appealed to me quite early on with the background I have, engineering, and also, during my university, I specialized in the energy sector. It was a natural fight to pick. And indeed, so I joined Sympower 7 years ago, but before that, I worked 4 years in non-energy per se related, but also because I was really driven to learn from a successful startup. What I see in the energy, like in the energy sector, like a lot of sectors, there are a lot of incumbents, and what you need is disruption to really bring the transition forward. So I always wanted to, disrupt that, and you do that in, startup and scale up, I think.
That's great. So you really had this motivation to disrupt the system and really from an early age. And you said you studied engineering, but you started in different sectors because you needed to actually learn from other sectors to know how to disrupt the energy one. And it's quite fascinating because you took a detour to actually strengthen your skills, right?
Yeah, correct. And I'm quite proud also of where Sympower went 7 years ago. Like when I joined, it was just a company of 10 people. And now we're around 220. So I did think, of course, it was not at all only because of me, but I think with the experience I could bring, I did help the company grow and reach that stage.
Yeah, tell me more about Sympower because, so it's about 7 years old. So it was, you joined it about 7 years ago. It's an aggregator. It's one of those companies that challenges, that disrupts the system. But really, what is an aggregator? Because, I've been in the field for quite some time, and for many years, the aggregators were kind of a very mysterious beast. And now we see them more and more. And so first, what is Sympower? Why is it disruptive? And then we'll go to why do we actually need aggregators in the energy sector?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think maybe before I try to explain in a more high level, and I think that's also one of the reasons I joined Sympower in the first place. Like what I really like about the role we play in the transition is the fact that we really help the electricity system be ready for a future which only have renewable as a supply. So we actually not the electricity grid, but we help them, which is the backbone of their system, be ready. So it really feels like being a spider in the web. And to explain a bit better what the aggregator is, I'll share maybe the challenge of moving to a fully renewable system. So the main challenge is that actually we need to move away from these fossil fuel power plants we've been relying on for so long.
Too long, probably.
Yeah. And move to renewable supply. And one of the big challenges with electricity is that you can't store it. So everything you produce, you should consume it. And the key to do that is flexibility. So having this wiggle room so that if you have too much supply or not enough, you can adjust the supply. So we've been adjusting the supply so far. So basically burning more steel fuel if we needed it. But with generation based on wind and solar, we need to be smarter about it. Like we need flexibility coming elsewhere than power plants. That's basically what we're doing by aggregating flexibility coming from distributed assets. So assets everywhere on the grid, which have the flexibility, the wiggle room to adjust the consumption whenever it's needed to balance the grids.
So what kind of assets are you talking about? Is it more about the various, let's say, the solar power installed on our roofs? Is it about big, large-scale capacity? What size are we talking about?
So what Sympower has been focusing on is on the larger consumers, especially industries that have assets. You can think about the light of greenhouses. You can think about electric boilers, furnaces for heavier industries. But in practice, it can be all kind of distributed assets. So also indeed rooftop solar, which you could also curtail. So reduce the production of batteries, electric cars. There's a lot of flexibility on the distributed side of things.
We had a few conversations already on energetic about the potential of flexibility and why we actually need it. I would like to refer to a super interesting episode last year with Louis Sunderland and Sophie Yule-Bennett really on how to make sustainability work for everyone, because there is this kind of big challenge. And now I can see you nod. I mean, you're more about balancing different assets. So if I can reformulate about really making sure that supply and demand actually match and that electricity is consumed when it's produced and the other way around, right? When we produce electricity, we get our assets to consume it. Whereas before it was only, let's say, top-down conversation. Now it has to be about really responding, making sure both sides respond to each other. And that's why we call demand response, right? So the thing is, in energetic, we've had a lot of people talking about the policy side, but it's really cool to have somebody from the technical side who can explain a little bit more. So you mentioned some great examples like greenhouses. You are based in Holland and your business started in Holland. And you've started like a Sympower. It has started in the Dutch ecosystem. So what have you noticed over the years? And why do you think the sector has grown so much? And I mean, the company headcount has also increased so much in the past years. So what have been like the breakthrough?
One small correction. The headquarters based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, but we actually started commercially in Finland. And
oh, wow.
It's also because the regulation were actually more favorable and the market conditions. And so one small detail, but like crucial detail I didn't share yet, is that by providing flexibility with lights of greenhouses or other assets, you actually get paid by the grid operator. So I think what made us successful is having this first launch in Finland with a lot of industries. So greenhouses, like one vertical we're very strong in, with a very strong business case of the fact that demand response works technically and can deliver the same service to the grid as a large power plant. We now have like 2 gigawatts of flexibility in our portfolio. So it doesn't this 2 gigawatts doesn't speak to anyone, but it's the equivalent of the peak consumption of a country like Estonia. So it's really big. So we've been able to prove that it's feasible and viable at scale. And we've been expanding to other countries. And there are still challenges, I think, related to regulation to scale this in every other countries in Europe. But if the conditions and regulations are there, it can really have a big impact. I don't know if I answered completely your question.
No. But I think it's really interesting that what you said about the fact that the flexibility gets actually paid and that there is a value in the fact that you don't consume electricity at a certain moment. And somehow it's one of those maybe keys that haven't been explored so much so far, right? So can you explain a little bit more why these, let's say, flexible assets are paid or compensated for being there? Because I'm thinking now of, let's say, smaller scale solutions, or maybe communities or villages that are going into, let's say, energy community business models, etc. They may not understand that if they also implement some form of flexibility, maybe they could also be compensated for that, and that would be another source of revenue, right? So anyway, why should we get paid when we consume electricity more flexibly?
Yeah, because it's needed. So like the grid operators, they need to have, so they don't own any asset themselves, and they're responsible to make sure that there is always this perfect balance between what is supplied and what is consumed at all time. So they have this mechanism and market where they actually pay companies. And so for decades, they've been paying power plants to be on standby just in case there might be this imbalance, and to have them increase or decrease their production. So similarly, what we provide is also called sometimes a virtual power plant. There's actually nothing virtual about it. It is a distributed power plant. But so we provide the same service as a power plant, but the difference is that we do that with a lot of assets and adjust. And you're completely right. I think a big element of our sales work is to educate our customers, being industries, explaining how it works, explaining that they can actually get paid. And when they finally get it, it's like, it's a mind change. They're like, oh, wait, you're not actually selling me something. You're paying me for not changing much of what I'm already doing now. It is the real education work that needs to happen on top of, regulation changes.
And I must say that Sympower has been under my radar, because I think that your company communicates really well. You did some communications about flexibility for children. How do you explain that? And I found it really cool and informative. And also in this kind of, okay, we need to make sure more people know what it's about. And you've made a real effort. And I must say, I really appreciate that. So it seems to be that communicating and your mission and your solutions being completely at the center of what you do, right? I see you nod again. So but it was not always the case, of course. So you are leading, let's say, the innovation bit. Has there been innovation on this side too?
I'll come to the innovation piece in a bit. I do think that a big change I've seen in, at least, in the countries we're active in, is a better understanding and a better sense of urgency since the energy crisis in 2021. Plus, also, especially in the Netherlands, a lot of issues around congestion. Like, this has really come to everyone's newspaper. It's making headlines that if you want to increase, your grid connection, or add a new grid connection because you want to add charging points for your EV, or you actually need to wait 2 years. So I think this sort of crisis or bottlenecks make what we do, I think, more relevant and more urgent. And that also, I noticed, really help us making what we do more mainstream. And also having those services being brought up to residential or B2C customers. You also see, especially I think in the Netherlands, but also in the Nordics, more and more energy suppliers, newcomers, providing more transparency to their customers, showcasing that you can also have dynamic prices, not a fixed fee, and you can benefit from it. So I think this idea of gaining value with the flexibility you have is reaching more and more people. And I think that's in our benefit.
That's really, really cool. And it's all about 2025. It's about making sure everyone gets to enjoy the benefits of this energy transition that we've been building. And as you said, you're a disruptor. And you have this particular role within a disruptive company to be head of innovation. So how do you keep on being disruptive? Tell me your secret sauce, because energetic is all about inspiration, right?
Yes, that's also what I love, being, this spider on the web type of company, is because you're very close to a lot of changes that are happening in the sector. So we've been focusing on industries and balancing markets, but a lot of other things happening, like the electrification of transport, the grid themselves, what I already mentioned, they face new type of challenges like congestion. So it's not anymore that balancing the grid, which is also a challenge you still have. It's also about how do they keep up with the increase of demand, with the electrification of transport, etc. And so all of that to say is that even a company like Sympower, which is a new kid on the block and innovative, like needs to be even more innovative, because if we just stick to the value proposition, we showcased 5 years ago, we might be irrelevant in 3 to 5 years from now, because we only at the beginning of the transition. So yeah, I'm very much busy with thinking ahead, trying to think about the future problems the customer we already have will be. And also, looking at the market trends. Like it's a difficult game. A lot of people are trying to look into their crystal ball, but I think the reality is we don't really have a clue. So it's important to keep this agility, and that's what I'm trying to set up with my small team is how do we keep our ears open and are able to test things really fast with time. Yeah.
And are there any orientation, any action, in any points you will be testing in 2025? And that's, of course, you can share, because I won't steal your company secrets, but what are you planning on addressing this year?
Yeah, so a couple of things are top of mind. One is for industry, so the existing customers we are working with is a focus on how can we deepen our services for them. Like those industries are facing new challenges, like prices being more volatile. So trying to help them with the flexible assets, not to help the grid, but help themselves. Like how can they maybe save on cost, have more self-production? So this theme of how can we provide value behind the meter for customers is one important theme. Second one is looking at renewable as a new type of customers. They're already a massive element on the energy mix, and we're only at the start. So I think the question is how can we develop new value proposition for this customer is an important one. Yeah.
So when you say renewables, it's more like solar parks and things like that?
Exactly. So, and especially like this, so independent power producer and basically the new energy, the energy suppliers having like a lot of renewable parks. Basically in the renewable space, we're moving more and more away from subsidies and guaranteed revenues to having them also exposed to market, like electricity prices being volatile. So there is a gap and a need for those players to be smarter about how they manage their renewable assets.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's quite interesting because earlier you mentioned the regulation, and the regulation has evolved a lot in this direction with the Fit for 55 package in Europe. Really, because Europe realized quite suddenly how exposed we were to the Russian gas and especially the volatility of the prices. So there is this kind of really big discussion to make sure that people actually that we can, when electricity comes from renewable sources, it's actually cheaper to use, and that reflects at all level, right? So you also need to respond to this kind of new constraints, and you've been like putting your ears everywhere to make sure that you are part of the conversation, right?
Exactly. And I think, so there is a big push to have more renewable, but it's also challenging it also brings challenges. And I think that's, where there is opportunity to innovate. But what you see, so for example, in a country like Greece, they're facing also oversupply of solar. I think they realized a couple of years ago that they had actually a lot of sun, and they built like massive capacity of renewable. And now, but the demand of electricity didn't follow. So now they're in a situation where most of the time, from spring to summer, they produce way more electricity from sun than what they consume. And that's led to new regulation that have been launched also super fast, forcing renewable parks like PV parks to actually curtail, so like reduce their production at the peak solar hours. And of course, it's not something you want.
No, it sounds absurd. But I've also seen that Greece has reversed their, let's say, off-peak tariff to be in the middle of the day and no longer in the middle of the night, so that people would actually launch their washing machine in the middle of the day instead of the middle of the night. and use electricity when it's abundant. So and it makes a lot of sense also to, for instance, when charging your car, or if you have this, it remains a restricted number of people, but more and more people are also equipped, for instance, with the air conditioning systems or heat pumps. And that makes more sense to use them during the day when there is a lot of electricity, right? So that's pretty...
Demand response at its best.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting also because I've worked on demand side response for some time now, seen how it works also in developing countries, in Burkina Faso, in Madagascar. It was really super fascinating because you can really see that potentially there is so much potential in having a lot of electricity during the day, especially in very hot days, very sunny days, etc. But what happens in these countries, in this context, is that there are actually blackouts during those times of the day, because people use a lot of air conditioning system that uses a lot of electricity, but the grid is not balanced enough, so nothing works, and there is a lack of understanding of the different assets and so on. So that's one thing. And another bit of work that I will be sharing more about in 2025 is working on summer energy poverty. I've done this work with the European Commission, and I think it's really demand side flexibility is also one of the, let's say, key aspects that have to be taken into consideration to make sure that people actually run their air conditioning system during the day if electricity is cheaper. But it makes sense only if electricity is cheaper. So what you said about regulation is super interesting, but really the missing bit may be about making sure that the technology must be there, but regulators and policymakers must also make sure that the prices are lower when there is abundant electricity produced outdoors. So that's really part of, let's say, much bigger conversation that includes very different stakeholders, asset managers, and so on. And it's not only for households, which is my primary, let's say, focus as with the Next Energy Consumer, my company, but it's also, as you said, for industries, and competitiveness is one of the big topic in 2025, right?
Yeah, 100% agree.
So for the time being, you've been focusing way more on industries, as you said. Are you planning on also looking at customer smaller end users, from households to small companies, or I don't know, municipal assets or things like that?
So not in the short midterm, to be honest. With the value proposition we have, I think there is still a lot to be done with industries, and also smaller industries like the food, supermarkets, like building automations. This is already going a bit lower in the sort of consuming, how big the assets are. Mm-hmm. And we also, since last year, have been investing a lot in also providing similar services to batteries, because we also see this is very complementary to what we already provide. For residential, that's actually the first year of Sympower started with residential. I think it's still super challenging to provide those services to operators with residential assets, especially if you're not an energy supplier. Okay. So one of the special thing about Sympower is that we are not an energy supplier, so we're an independent player. Mm-hmm. And so we're also active in countries where this is allowed. In a lot of countries in Europe, it's still not allowed to play as an independent player. You need to be an energy supplier. And that remains a challenge for us to act on the residential level.
Okay. Wow. Oh, I didn't know that. And it makes a lot of sense, and it's really interesting. So I'll have to interview you in a couple of years or so to know how that bit evolves. Let's go back to the example you mentioned, like a supermarket or so on. How would you monitor, manage their assets? Because everybody knows a supermarket. It has a lot of fridges. They need to be powered on 24/7. There is a lot of artificial lighting. Maybe some ovens, I don't know. So what would you do? Because you can't switch the lights. You can switch off the light, but you can't switch off the fridge, right? So how would you manage that?
Yeah, so actually, the way we work is we start with what we call a flex scan. And it's basically the scanning how much flexibility there is at a customer. So in the example of supermarket, we would indeed look at, what are the different assets that consume throughout the day and throughout the week, and how flexible they are. So you directly said they're not flexible, but actually, if you look at a cooling system or freezer for a supermarket, if you do switch off the system for 1 or 2 hours, it won't impact the temperature. Like maybe the 1 degree will change, but that is still the range which is acceptable. So you actually have a flexibility for those systems to be switched off for up to 2 hours, let's say. And then it also means that the rest of the time when you consume, you're still available for the grid. So you're getting paid for being available. And if they need it, you can still switch it up for 2 hours. So there is actually flexibility to be unlocked. So after this flex scan, what we do is we identify how much flexibility there is, which assets, what are the constraints. And then we also assess how much money can they make with this. And if this is interesting, we send a contract and basically we install our hardware unless the customer is able to communicate via API, but not a lot are able to. So we install our hardware to basically know in real time how much they consume and also being able to control them when the grid needs it. So basically this hardware is connected to a platform and this platform is connected to the grid. So we are able to switch them off when the grid needs it and switch them back on when it's over.
So it feels like you are the pilot or the captain of their ship, of their energy ship, and from there are some moments where they can just go with the current, and some others where they actually need a little more power, and you're behind. That's really, really super fascinating. But Olivia, there is also a discussion we need to have. a very difficult one. No, I'm kidding, of course. But I mean, you are one of the few women in leadership position with an engineering background in the energy sector. So tell me more about your experience. I see you smile. It looks like Sympower didn't give you such a hard time, but yeah, you are a role model for many, many young women. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, thanks. I hope I am. Like for me, it's a bit the story of my life. Like I have 3 brothers. I went to engineering school. Like I've always been surrounded by men, I think, in my life. During my studies, I think there are only 15% of girls. And for sure, the energy sector is super masculine. Like the number of times I went to an event and I was the only woman surrounded by white male suit up. So I think it never bothered me. I'm also happy to be that person. And like, I do want to be like, maybe I'm the only woman, but like, I'm going to make myself heard. Like I never found it a problem. However, I do feel I want to indeed inspire more women to be in that space, and not only energy. I think, be more in the beta or engineering role.
Yeah. And you started in finance, right? It's also a very masculine sector.
In fintech, it was, quite masculine as well, indeed.
So you're not afraid of this challenge and paving the way for others. I mean, that's great. And I feel that 2025 is one we need to keep on having this conversation. And that's, as my guest in the last episode of 2024 said, and Agombo, it's a scandal. We need to still have the conversation. But it's at the same time, all the women I ask this question are like, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it because I still see something that I don't like. And just being the only woman in the room, it's something that I don't like, you don't like, and that we need to do something. So we still need to be vocal about it, right? And things are changing. Maybe in startups like yours, things are even like great examples and so on. And I mean, it's now also your time to brag, maybe to attract some female talents among your team, right? So it's also about fostering the right climate, and having women like you at really at the head of the organization can also help. Of course. But let's think about the future, because we are reaching the end of this episode. So what kind of lessons have you learned about really driving sustainable innovation? Because I can see that you are very, very positive and very optimistic too. But are there any drawbacks you would like to reflect on, or maybe some lessons that you have learned from these drawbacks?
Yeah, 100%. I think my biggest learning, and I think that's something I've tried to compensate back, especially in last year in 2024, is really being close to customers, like really trying to listen to them, understand what their problems are. I think it's easy pitfall, especially for technical driven companies and people to think about solutions and, the system. But at the end of the day, you need to think about like how to make things attractive, easy to understand, accessible to customers. And I think it's a pitfall a lot of companies are falling into in the energy sector. And I think we've also been doing that. But that's definitely, I think critical for success in the space.
Okay. And what are your hopes and expectations for 2025? It can be professional or personal as well.
I think I would love professionally to, fail a lot actually and be able to pivot. So, end up with success, like having, a new value proposition we actually want to invest in, but reach that when we have failed a lot, learned a lot and pivoted.
I love this way of defining innovation. Like the innovation is about trying and failing a lot and starting again with the smile on your face, right?
Exactly.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time, Olivia. It's been really super insightful and all the best to you and to Sympower team for this new year.
Thanks, Marianne. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Energetic. It's been a pleasure diving deep into the world of sustainability and the just energy transition with some of the most forward-thinking mouths out there. I'm Maureen Cornelis, your host from policy consultancy Next Energy Consumer, and it's been an incredible journey growing this podcast together with you, our knowledgeable and passionate listeners. Since 2021, we've shared countless stories, insights, and ideas over more than 40 episodes, and it's all thanks to your support and enthusiasm. If you enjoyed our journey so far and want to help us keep the conversation going, why not support us on Patreon? Every bit helps us bring more inspiring content your way. Check out the show notes for the link. And hey, if you're a part of an organization that shares our passion for a sustainable and inclusive energy future, we're excited to explore sponsorship opportunities with you. It's a fantastic way to connect with a dedicated audience and make an even bigger impact together. Shout out to the fantastic Igor Mikhailovich from Podcast Media Factory for his incredible sound design work, making every episode a joy to listen to. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Energetic on your favorite podcast platform. And if you think a friend or a colleague could benefit from our episode, we'd love for you to spread the word. It helps us grow and keep the energy transition conversation alive. Sharing is caring. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to stay engaged and update on all things energetic. Thanks once again for lending your ears. Until next time.